This is Big Podcast.
To Build a Big Podcast, David Hooper with you. This is the marketing podcast for podcasters. How to grow your audience. Make a better podcast that actually attracts people and people care about when you are not there. Do something that makes a difference. Do something that spreads a message. I'm doing what we'll call a lo-fi episode for this one, and this is me in my office. I just heard this clip from Mannie Fresh. I want to play just a couple seconds of it now, talk about it, and then go into the whole clip.
You got 8 sounds. Figure it out. How to make 8 sounds incredible. I challenge young kids right now. Make 8 sounds incredible.
If you don't know who Mannie Fresh is, a producer, writer, did a lot of the stuff for Cash Money Records, and a well-known, respected musician out of New Orleans. Any of what we call bounce music that came out of New Orleans. He was there during that time. This is 30 years ago, big in the 90s, just sold his catalog though, still big. A lot of the stuff he did with Juvenile, and you've probably heard that. When he was making these hits, just during that time, he didn't have a lot of technology. And this is one of the things that we have seen again and again and again in the music industry. There's a lesson for podcasters here, which is why I bring this up. This is an interesting music business piece of trivia. You may have heard of Chet Atkins, and Chet Atkins was known for doing 2 guitar parts at once. He would play the bass part, boom, 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 and then he would play a melody on top of it. And what Chet Atkins didn't know when he listened to records way back in the day, there were no videos, is that there were actually 2 guitar players playing. He thought that what he was hearing was the way that it was, one guitar player. He learned how to play 2 guitar parts on one guitar. If you think about some of the big music albums that we've had over the years, Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys, Sgt. Pepper's by the Beatles, they did not have a lot of tracks to work with. Recording technology, it was not what it is now. They got 4 tracks, they've got 8 tracks, they've got 16 tracks. You had to get really creative. And that's what Mannie was talking about. Again, I'm going to play the whole clip in a minute. But I want you to think about this when it comes to your podcast. What really connects people to something is not going to be crazy production. And I think that what we are doing right now with podcasting, because even with a phone, you've got more or less unlimited tracks. You can piece them together one at a time, whatever. But even if you're just doing a monologue, we've gotten really sloppy about that. Watch a YouTube podcast. I'll put that in quotes because I realize that YouTube, not really a podcast, but watch a YouTube delivery and you'll see these jump cuts. They're not doing a jump cut because that's the style. They're doing a jump cut because these guys can't deliver a message for more than a few seconds without messing up. Back in the day of live radio, even without live radio, when we just had tape and razor blades, and it was a bitch to make a cut. You had to get good or you weren't going to be in business very long. These days, oh man, we'll fix it in the mix. Oh, we don't need to worry about using a good mic. We've got Adobe Enhance. Don't let the fact that we've got this technology now let you get sloppy. I'm going to play the rest of this Mannie Fresh quote for you.
Old analog stuff, Moog keyboards only had 2 outputs. Just to put it in regular terms, it was only like 2 sounds that could have came out at once. Old drum machines had 8 outputs. So basically you was limited to like 10 sounds, any song that you done. No more than that. You went over that, something was clipping something was on top of something. Right now, with computers and all of that, you can go as nuts as you want. Every song that you heard early Cash Money was only 8 sounds. Regardless to what was going on, whatever you heard, I could only do 8 sounds at a time. So that made it super creative. You got 8 sounds. Figure it out. How to make 8 sounds incredible. I challenge young kids right now. Make 8 sounds incredible.
And people might say, oh, Mannie Fresh was just a good writer. Yeah, why do you think that was? He worked with what he had. So when you're thinking about buying new stuff, adding more tracks, using Adobe Enhance, just saying, I don't need to plug in an external mic. We'll just use a phone mic, run it through Adobe Enhance. No, don't count on that. It might work for the little podcasts that you're doing now, but when it comes to taking things to the next level, let's say you want to do an NPR level thing. They don't want that. They want what a photographer will call in camera, meaning that what you shoot, what you record is more or less what it's going to sound like. They got a thing in music called comping. A lot of podcasters do it. Comping is more or less a compilation of 5 takes, 10 takes, how many takes that you can record. And then they piece those 5 or 10 takes into one perfect take. And then they fix it up in post-production even more. You should be able to get through something, man. And I'm not saying you got to be flawless, but as podcasters, we're really relying heavily on technology. So I want you to think about that. And this should make you feel better if you feel like your equipment isn't up to par. This setup that I've got right now, I mentioned this is a lo-fi podcast. That's what I'm calling it. SM58 by Shure, that's the microphone. It costs $99. I've got a Vocaster 1 by Focusrite as my interface. That's, I think, $80 right now. So under $200 worth of equipment. And I'm recording this directly into Audacity. There you go. That's all it takes. So take the advice of Mannie Fresh. I'm going to play this one more time for you, the Mannie Fresh Challenge.
How to make 8 sounds incredible. I challenge young kids right now. Make 8 sounds incredible.
Take it and use that on your next podcast. Just a few sounds, as few tracks as possible, as few takes as possible, as little equipment as possible. Hey, if you're looking for personal help with your podcast, growing that audience, doing what I talk about on this podcast, I've got something called Big Podcast AMP, AMP. It stands for Audio Monetization Program. You can find all the information at bigpodcast.com/AMP. That's bigpodcast.com/AMP. While you are on the site, subscribe to the podcast. Never miss an episode. And when you do, I'll see you on the next one.